Hello everybody, I'm that dude over there, and I could have waited. I could have worked on other videos where I talked about the first experience with a new game, a new challenge run idea I made for my friends, or even an existing one continuing off shit I've done before. But here I am, again, talking about the show that thinks it's better than it really is. Now, I've already mentioned this show not once but twice before, each time addressing how it improved moving forward. Whether that be through dissecting the season or by dissecting the mysteries, but like a nasty virus, Velma somehow comes back even worse than before. And I've made call-out posts detailing my excitement for this failure, getting ready for a fail that left me laughing and pointing. But this season has left me a husk of my former self, sucking the soul out of me and leaving me but a humble leaf on the wind. But as I say when making this series, it's better to improve than destroy, and rather than contemplate my life choices over the course of the past month or 2 weeks of making this video, I'd rather discuss how I could improve on the filth that was Velma Season 2. Now, as I mentioned, I see myself as no writer. I am merely a fan of the storytelling process. But I've seen furry with a better plot structure than Velma. And I bet the stories on webtoons would even seem like a torch in a dark cave when compared to the show. However, I will never know, because I refuse to use webtoon. So I'll simply discuss the 2 areas of improvement I would make, before detailing how this season affects my vision of Season 2. But before I start, let me quickly address a few things I liked in this season. 1. The animation. Just like Season 1, the visuals are amazing. The animators and artists associated with this series really need a chiropractor with how heavily they are carrying the visuals. From the early hallucinations of Norville to the detailed expressions and shots, there isn't a single thing about this season I would hate on artistically. And I pray that the people who made this are paid accordingly and are given the respect that they deserve. 2nd, Fred. Say what you will about the characters in Velma, but this version of Fred has been the single-handedly best character of the show. Always acting like a beacon in a storm while doing dumb things to make you feel anything other than boredom, annoyance, or brain dead. And 3, this one and only joke in the whole of Velma that actually made me laugh. And since I could not find it as of actually making this video, I will recreate it for you. Mom, if you're there, please give me a sign. Guys, you're right. She is here. She's ignoring me. These are the only things that made me appreciate Season 2. And with that out of the way, we can finally start talking about the problems. Starting off, the characters are terrible and haven't seemed to have grown since their first encounter with the mystery. Daphne goes from being a semi-decent character with a storyline about finding herself to becoming Velma's lapdog. It feels like whatever she does, it's all because of her feelings to her or the actions that Velma has done. Why aren't they a couple at the beginning? Because Velma said Norville 8 different times when saying I love you. Why does she take a break from dating Velma in Season 2? Because Velma belittles her beliefs and ignores Daphne's interest. There's an implied moment where Daphne cheats on Velma, but it's not because Daphne feels attraction towards the other person, it's because she wants to get back at Velma. I just got so tired of her saying or asking others about her that it felt like she fell back into her established trope of being a love interest. But speaking of Satan's child herself, Velma is even more annoying and terrible in Season 2. I've already talked about it with Daphne, but she flat out ignores Norville's hallucinations, basically confirming what Norville said in season 1.
This is unbelievable. I put you above everything in my life. But I draw the line at my family. If our situations were reversed, you would have left me for dead after my first hallucination.
She seeks Norville's aid in one episode in exchange for helping him with his dad, but she doesn't keep her end of the bargain and gives up on the deal halfway in. There are little to no scenes that explore her dynamic with Fred above what was already established in season 1, thank God. But ignoring how she impacts the characters, Velma feels more entitled and narcissistic than before. I love when she claims to be a mystery solver or a great detective, since she does nothing to justify it. Like before, the characters more or less stumble into clues, and the amount of jumping to conclusions is ridiculous. Say what you want about season 1, at least Velma had reasonable doubt before jumping Fred in episode 1. In season 2, if there's even a whiff of suspicion, Velma automatically assumes that that person is the killer. What is her proof? I used napkin at Spooner saying X is the killer. And the amount of times Velma calls the police into question also bothers me. The reason why the legal route is long is because it takes time to gather enough evidence to corner a suspect. It's why you don't see Light getting caught in Death Note until like the end of season 2. They need to look at things from so many different angles to ensure an innocent person isn't accidentally indicted. But fuck that, I guess. It's much more entertaining to watch Velma fail to catch the killer 70 million times. Norville had the most potential for me going into the season. I knew they weren't going to handle the hallucinations well, with season 1 being a very good case as to why, but the hallucinations were always the most fascinating part to me. However, it feels like the writers gave up halfway in with this season, with even Victoria herself saying how old it is. That's not funny. It's a waste of time. If you are struggling to keep it plot relevant, then you should have worked to resolve it sooner, not call it out. Oh, but we can't have that. We need to include another 5 extra scenes of Norville not taking drugs because he's not Shaggy. Norville's scenes go from being to a drag faster than the show realizes, because all they do is nothing and waste time. They overuse it and fail to make it relevant to Norville's growth. But unlike the others, Fred is the only character that kept me going, whether that be through the VA's delivery or the unintentionally funny writing for Fred. He always made a scene better, and Fred does something that actual serious characters are afraid of doing, going through an arc and changing. Fred's arc for this season is attempting to gain his father's respect, doing this through his spooky stuff job and hard work. He even manages to win over his deceased mother by standing up to her and proving his worth. Is he still a dumbass? Sure. Is he still a dick? Absolutely. But his charismatic nature, along with his drive to be better, make Fred the unironically best character of Velma as a whole. I would rather watch a whole season of Fred fucking up trying to gain his father's approval than any scene where Velma is attempting to solve a mystery. Now normally, that would be it, since diving into the side characters is a rather waste of time. Velma, the show, doesn't treat them with respect, and as a result boils them down to simple characteristics. However, we need to talk about at least one new character the show decided to introduce because they thought it was important enough to make her. This girl is named Amber, and she is the daughter to the Hex girl everyone thinks looks ugly in this art style. I'm not going to comment on the Hex girl cameos since I don't really care about the Hex girls. However, the show did not need to create Amber for this show. Amber's role in most episodes is to push the idea of spirits and the occult exist, willing things into reality through vibes and acting as a foil to Velma. But here's the thing, we already have a character who was built in season 1 who could have filled this role and would have been better for it. And surprisingly, it's Gigi. You know, the girl everyone thought was going to be named Scooby, so Norville would be doing Scooby-Doo. Anyway, in season 1, she was built to create a rift between Norville and her by having Norville grow to be more independent from Velma. Gigi is a smart girl and is shown to evolve in season 1 as she grows into her own person, separated from the clique of popular girls thanks to Velma's involvement. As season 1 comes to a close, She and Norville break up because of Velma, and she returns to her former life. With how she was handled, it would have been interesting to have her grow into Velma's rival, adopting a new way to solve mysteries not through science, but through mysticism and the unknown. Plus, with her involvement in the main mystery, thanks to her dad's involvement in Project Scooby, it has great interactions baked into the concept. She could fight against her dad if she attempts to solve the mystery. You can still have Velma be jealous as she believes Gigi is trying to steal Daphne from her, like Norville. Heck, you could have Gigi and Norville explore their relationship as they revisit his grandmother's research. But instead, Gigi is thrown to the sidelines to explore Amber and her dynamic with Velma and Daphne. Honestly, it's a waste of space, all for the sake of the finale's reveal. But I guess I should address the actual plot. Basically, a new killer is introduced who is singling out men and killing them through tearing off their junk. Now, I'm no doctor, but it doesn't take a genius to see that there's a good chance no one is going to die from this kind of method. Also, there's way too much blood for a kill that's so tame in comparison. While I like that the kills are male focused compared to last season, comparing a woman's brain to a man's smaller head is not a good comparison. While Velma and crew stumble again into evidence, Norville has to deal with the hallucinations that come from the guilt he has about murdering Fred's mom. But the problem here is that the story doesn't commit to this. Because they introduce occult stuff with Amber, they decide halfway into the show to instead make Fred's mom a ghost that happens to haunt Norville until Fred can grow the fuck up. Do you see the problem here? I understand haunting Norville because, you know, he murdered her, but if Fred not being a man is causing her to stay, then why is she not haunting him? Heck, the more I think about it, the worse it seems to get. The only way Norville was able to rid himself from Victoria was through stress eating and zapping his head with electricity. If this were a spirit, it wouldn't have mattered if Norville had done this. Unless the story is trying to say that Victoria was more repulsed by people eating chips than angry about dying. But whatever, maybe she had a bad case of spiritual IBS when Norville fried himself. Okay, so ignoring all the relationship drama, because it has as much flavor as a spoonful of pure chocolate, the gang put together that the reason all these people were murdered was because they were all connected to Project Scooby. Alright, but I need to stress, how? How were these characters connected at all with this project? Listen, Gigi's father I get because he worked for the military and was moved over to focus on Project Scooby. But you're really going to sit down and tell me that the unimpressive cop from season 1 was not only smart enough, but also trusted enough to be let in with a top secret government assignment, 2 random ass morgue attendants, and also a priest and a fucking teacher were also qualified to be there. Really? The only bigger reach than this is how Velma was able to find the true culprit behind the deaths. After looking at a dog gnawing on a bus seat, Velma deduces that the killer is a dog. Her rationale being that the killer seemingly liked sneakers, didn't like the 4th of July, and attacked low-reaching fruit of the body. However, let's just realize how big of a stretch this really is. First off, the killer likes sneakers. Sure, you could point that at a dog tearing apart shoes as the show would imply, but is it unreasonable to think that someone who is, say, a fashionista would not like shoes? Listen, I know it's a trope, but hear me out. Someone who's typically described as a fashionista typically has a large wardrobe. All types of clothes, from shirts to pants to dresses to even shoes. If you had someone who was into fashion, who also liked the sporty casual look, they would be into sneakers. Someone like, say, Gigi or any of the popular girls in Daphne's clique. But they also hate the 4th of July because of the fireworks. That could be it. Well, here's the thing. They never specified why they hate the 4th of July. Perhaps the killer didn't like hot temperatures of summer, or didn't like the greasy, often fatty foods that are associated with the 4th of July cookout. Or if we wanted to go to extremes, perhaps it's a character that didn't even like the culture of America and hate what it stands for in the modern day. Kinda like a certain detective trying to solve a murder case. And as far as attacking the lower regions of the human body, any weapon could have also done the job. Go Saw style and strap an iron chain down there. Use a chainsaw. There is no murder weapon, so the limits are up to the imagination. Jumping to the conclusion that it's a dog would make you look insane at worst, or make someone assume that you're talking about a dog trainer at best. But that pales in comparison to the accomplice. I'm not talking about Dr. Perdue because, like Amber, she was not necessary for the plot. I'm talking about Uncle Scooby, or Sophie if you actually cared about spoilers. Now, first off, having Sophie being a killer could have been interesting. At the end of season 1, Velma kicked Sophie out of their home, and Velma had always been a pain in her ass. If you instead played with Amon wanting to reconnect with Velma's mom, you could have had Sophie want revenge against Velma for stripping the man that she loved from her. That, or, killing Velma because she's a piece of shit. I'm good with both. But instead, we have a motive that makes the military look sexist and Sophie be a victim. Bitch, you are working with the killer. You are not a victim. But the way Velma finds out it's Sophie is legitimately dumb. She goes through a body swap episode where she takes Daphne's body and learns about the problems attractive people face. If that is the lesson, then Velma putting together that it was Sophie still doesn't make sense, since Velma would never deliver a compliment to anyone, ever, unless it satisfied her sex drive. But then we get to the scene everyone's been talking about, where Scrappy kills Velma. Listen, I know everyone loves this idea, and I loved it too, but the execution was just awful. Velma actually comes up with a smart idea for once. Since she knows that Scrappy is immune to physical damage, she plans to attack him on a biological level, using chocolate to poison him. This is a great plan. Not a sound one, but a great defensive maneuver. However, before Velma can enact the plan, the show undermines itself for the sake of a joke and a callback to episode 1 of season 2. Even the way Velma dies isn't good, since she dies off screen and the only person who cares is Daphne. Her mom is also there, her dad is also there. Hell, Norville, who has been hanging around her since Daphne and Velma split, doesn't care. But before we can get that moment, Scrappy survives and plans to attack the survivors. So how do we kill the invulnerable threat? Go shenanigans. Go shenanigans! Occult stuff. Really? Even when chocolate was presented, and onions could have been an option as well since it was a wedding.
Yes.
But we can't have the dog because that's too childish. Get the fuck out of here. So the writers prepare to send Velma off. Bold of them to assume Velma would go to heaven with how much gaslighting, gatekeeping, and girl bossing she's done. But Amber implies that she could revive her with the right spell on Halloween, prompting a sequel season or a Halloween special. Hooray. The problems here are exponential, and I didn't even touch on the blatant hypocrisy with how Edna Perdue treats Velma. So how do we fix this? Okay, how do we fix this without completely writing it off? Well, here's the thing. I already did cover how I would improve it. Despite the main idea of how I take it being wrong, the general idea of how I improve it stays true for season 2. You keep your animal twist villain, you still have connections to the main mystery, and you still have Daphne and Velma being closer by the end of the season than at the beginning. I would check that video out instead. However, there are some ways I would also improve that with what we've been talking about in season 2. But I will also acknowledge that going back to that video is like comparing modern game theory videos to the early game theory videos. The audio is pretty bad and the music could be a bit loud, so I'll recap a lot of what I said here. So, first off, with Velma finding the culprit of season 1, she is shown to be a lot more accepted, given special treatment for finding the killer and viewed in a positive light. Meanwhile, Daphne, who has spent our season 1 trying to expose Velma as the culprit, has lost all credibility and is seen in an incredibly negative light, getting rejected by her former friends and being unable to have lunch peacefully without people slandering her name or throwing insults at her. In the original video, I discussed how this would lead to the introduction of the cult, taking people in Daphne's position and building them back up. And while I still believe that, I think I would change the narrative a bit. They take in people who have been battered down, rejected from society, and helps them return to their status quo. This being done through accepting them, manipulating them, and having them go find more members. This eventually leads to her recruiting Shaggy, leaving Velma, Fred, and Scooby to uncover the truth behind the cult and their operations. While I discussed a minor change before, here's how I would add to the idea. First off, I would actually use Gigi, maybe have her introduced in season 1 like before, and have her grow similarly in the background like season 1 of the original Velma. Have her find her own individuality and break herself from the mold she finds herself in. She could be smart like Fred or Velma, with the attitude of Daphne or the other popular girls. Man, people who have only seen the show will be confused when I say that she's smart like Fred. Anyway, do all of this for season 2 just to have a rival for Velma. Velma gets an ego boost from solving the last mystery, so much so that it draws back that pride and attitude she had when she was young. Velma sees the results of the cult on Daphne as she joins, and when she coming back with a whole new attitude, and acting way too differently than normal. Throughout the season, Velma would try to uncover the truth behind the cult while slowly pushing people away, eventually pushing the person she liked the most, Shaggy, into the arms of the cultists while she's trying to get info on them. While this is going on, Gigi is doing her own investigating, using tarot cards and the occult to gather insight, along with research and investigation. Velma would call this a waste of time since there's lack of evidence that sham methods like this could help with the investigation. But after pushing everyone away and having no one left, in her moment of vulnerability, Gigi comes to support Velma and extends a lending hand. And by humbling herself and working with Gigi, Velma is able to reconnect with Fred and find answers that she was struggling with. Meanwhile, on the cult side of things, Daphne feels like herself again thanks to the cult reaffirming her actions and making her feel safe when the world wanted to seemingly punish her for how she felt. Shaggy, who has seen only the benefits of the cult, doesn't care whether they exist or not, but gets pulled in thanks to Velma demeaning him for being useless and an idiot for not thinking there's something more going on behind the scenes. Here we get time for Daphne and Shaggy to properly bounce off each other in a safe space, basically planting the seeds of their friendship through their shared pain of being hurt by Velma. It also helps that Shaggy's kind attitude and wanting to be friends with everyone reaches Daphne. As the season plays out, eventually Fred comes up with a plan to have Velma join the cult on false pretenses to get more information on their leader. Velma rejects this plan because she doesn't like the idea behind the cult and is too afraid of the consequences of failure. But with some convincing on Gigi's end, Velma decides to go in, and while she's in there, she's able to get some great clues. However, she doesn't actually meet the leader in person, only ever communicating through a confessional after an obscene wait time. This all coming to a head when she is thrown out after experiencing a hallucination mid-conversation. Yeah, I didn't bring this up in my rewrites before, but Velma still has her hallucinations at the end of season 1. These never get resolved, but I would play it where the more she gets back into the groove of things, the less frequent her hallucinations would show up. Her hallucinations being the worst when she believes she has pushed everybody away again. This season would end with Velma, Fred, and Gigi busting an event the cult plans to set up, a celebration of life by ending their own during a party held by their leader. Shaggy would find this odd, but Daphne would follow obediently, saying that there's nowhere left for her to go. Velma manages to wake the cultists up by revealing the shady goals of their leader not existing as no one in the group could properly identify who the leader is. Velma delivers a message that, while yes, everyone has done terrible things, and the weight of these things vary wildly, they should seek to be better and take responsibility, not letting these mistakes weigh you down for the rest of your life. And as she delivers this message, the hallucination that comes from the cult fades away from Velma's vision. This saves the people involved, and Daphne, while not liking Velma, begins to respect her as she leaves. The group gets a happy ending, but during the post-credit scene, from the confessional, a bird flies out of the booth. While this was initially planned as a cheap nod to Mystery Inc., I think this works a lot better as a connection back to the research I presented in the prior videos. The bird was one of the few successful experiments that Daya created. However, it was deemed a failure since no one could get the bird to talk in their presence, only speaking when nobody would see them. This bird witnessed the crimes that the testing brought about, with many animals being killed in the process, and not wanting to be another victim, the bird escaped and desired mankind's downfall for their heinous crimes against life. And what better way than through their own demise by their own hands? Would this villain come back? Probably, just to get the firm link between the bird and the cult back to Daya. And while this idea is fairly generic or probably not fully thought through, it was a trillion times better than the 5-hour soul-crushing slog of Season 2. Now, there's no way of telling what Velma could do or where it could go from here, but honestly, I'm glad with that. Now that Velma has ended its obligatory 2-season run, it can rot in hell with its cheap cliffhanger to bait more views and hype. Like I said, going into this, I was hoping for a fun bad experience, where I could point my finger at Velma and laugh for how hard it's trying to be better. But instead, I feel drained on a soul level. I feel like I've lost 50 years of my life and I didn't get anything out of it. But hey, that's just my take. And if you cheered in celebration at Velma dying to Scrappy Doo, the unsung hero of Velma, let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, leave a like and subscribe to pay for my post-Velma healing process. And until next time, stay safe out there.